Good morning everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar where we're going to be talking about how to build the skills and capabilities of your workforce. And before we get going, we as usual like to introduce ourselves. I'm Victoria Templeton, HR Knowledge Manager here at HR Solutions, and I'm joined by Sue Watson, Head of Client Services, and Rebecca Johnson, our Marketing Manager. And because we've got so many of you who have joined us today, we've placed you all on mute. However, we do want to hear your questions as usual. So when you see this slide at the end of the webinar, it means that we're ready to take your questions. And so I'm just going to quickly run through how you can submit those. So on the screen now, you'll see an image of what your GoToWebinar panel looks like. And then simply type in your question here in the question pane. And as I said, we'll aim to read out and answer as many as we can at the end. So keep your questions coming, and we'll get to those. And of course, when you see this slide, it means we're going to be running a confidential poll. So we're looking to seek your input, which will help in the running of today's webinar. And it also gives everybody here on the webinar an insight into what other organisations may be doing, and just out of interest to see how other people are dealing with skills development and capability development. And so when you see that slide, that means we're at a poll. So what I'm going to do is just quickly spend a couple of minutes, not even that, just going through the UK skills gap, the situation that we're all operating in. Then I'll focus on the workplace culture, which is fundamental for learning and development, and then talk through how we can look at increasing workplace skills through various ways. And then, as I said, we'll take your questions and answers at the end. So to get things going, just to put things into context, we've had two significant events in the last 3-4 years that have led essentially to a skill shortage across the UK. First of all, COVID-19. What we saw as a result of COVID-19 is mass walkout. So we had what was called the Great Resignation. We also saw an increase in early retirement because people reevaluated their lives, and making life-changing decisions about their career, employment and retirement. So we saw an increase in that. We also saw many workers leave employment because of the need to care for a vulnerable person or somebody that became ill health resulting from COVID-19. And of course, there were some sectors impacted significantly, like the health and social care sector, where actually many employees left employment because actually because of COVID-19 and the impact on their health. So COVID-19 was significant, obviously, for many ways, but from a learning and development point of view, it meant that the UK workforce lost many skills and capabilities. And then the second significant event was as part of leaving the European Union, it saw the end of free movement. So what that did as part of leaving the EU, the UK introduced its own new points-based immigration system, so putting in new processes, new checks, requirements for employing people from within the EU, whereas ordinarily they could travel and live and work freely within the EU. Obviously that's now ended. And I suppose the sectors that were worse hit were those such as your health and social care, hospitality, because they're typically ones that relied on skills and resources from outside the UK. And of course the EU settlement scheme, if somebody didn't apply to remain settled in the UK, then it meant they had to return to their home country. So they're two significant events that have happened in the last 3-4 years that have ultimately impacted on how organisations have the skills and capabilities in their workplace. And of course, what that's all meant, and you may be able to recognise some of these, you know, where we've had new starters join an organisation during the pandemic, they haven't had the same onboarding process. Young people that have just out of university and college haven't had the same opportunities to employment and learning because it's been harder for them to find and get into work. Many organisations obviously had to survive during the pandemic, and that meant scaling back on training budgets or even pulling the training budgets completely just to focus on maintaining and surviving as a business. And so what we've seen there is also increased vacancies. So where we've had the ending of free movement of people, where EU nationals have returned to their home countries. That's obviously created vacancies and therefore created gaps from a skills point of view for, as I said, particularly the hospitality and health and social care sector, although obviously all areas can be affected. So, you know, they're the significant changes, and that's, I guess, the context that we have to operate in. And earlier this year, we ran our annual SME survey result where we asked business owners to give us their feedback on or their concerns for going into 2023. And I thought it was interesting just to share with you from that survey, the second most important area from a people management perspective for this year was that 44% of respondents said that employee capability was their second biggest challenge. So we know that employers are struggling. We know that the skill gap is there. And furthermore, we've got other information such as from the Business Barometer report, where it said 78% of UK organisations suffered a decline in output, profitability or growth because of a lack of available skills. And then finally, the Federation of Small Businesses also reported 80% of small businesses face difficulties in recruiting candidates excuse me, with the suitable skills. So as you can see, clearly the evidence is there, the data is there that tells us the UK is struggling with skills in the workforce, and so it's about thinking about what strategy you can have moving forward to bridge those gaps. So I think what would be useful now is just to run, we've got 3 polls in this section, and it's really, as I said, sharing your insights just helps everybody on the webinar just to see how everybody else is feeling. Is everybody struggling and that kind of thing? So the polls are confidential, they're anonymous, so please feel free to participate, just not be in the full screen mode. And the first one is, do you find that employee capability is an issue in your own organisation?
I think everybody's quick off the mark this morning.
Brilliant, that's good.
Okay, I'll close that poll
And
I'll share the results.
Sharing. Oh, I can't see the results. There we go.
That's 67% yes and 33% no.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
and that's
significant.
Yeah, and doesn't come as a surprise.
No.
And hopefully you'll take some good points away from the webinar just to give you some things to think about back in your own organisation. So you're not on your own. There are other organisations also similar, feeling the strain of it. And our second poll is actually more from a budget point of view. And have you actually reduced or even pulled your training budget, as I said, on the back of those last 2 significant events we've all experienced?
Okay, excuse me. I'll close that poll and I'll share the results with you. Oh, that's quite good.
Okay.
So quite a few have actually boosted it and almost balanced with some have reduced it or pulled it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely organisation specific and sector specific in some areas, because some sectors have been hit harder than others, haven't they? And challenges with recruitment might mean they've had to use more expensive routes to get staff, or indeed increase pay to get people on board. So it has affected training. Yeah,
and it's interesting in the context of the cost of living climate as well, which is fascinating. And I appreciate there's 4%, unfortunately, on this webinar that have had to pull it, but I totally get that with the cost of living. So it is really good to see there's quite a high percentage who've actually boosted it, or at least stayed the same at 21%. It's a hard one, isn't it? And I think now
It's a
we've
hard
sort
one.
of had a good period on the back of COVID of having some stability almost. Employers are probably thinking about the skills gap then, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And then we've got the third poll in this section, more from a strategy point of view. Do you have one?
Mm-hmm. I think from the queries we get, there's quite a number of people just react to requests.
Yeah.
There's actually very few who have a particular strategy to focus the training and development in a particular area that's related to the business strategy. Okay, so I'll close that poll and I'll share those results.
Okay, generally
Again,
split.
it's quite close.
Yeah, very close. So for the 46% of you, I guess like what you're saying, Sue, it's very much reactive, isn't it? And some employers might be still getting back on track following the pandemic. And perhaps hopefully as we go through the webinar, it will give you some food for thought to think about actually trying to take a more proactive approach. You know, especially with, you know, there's quite a high percentage of you on the call that are struggling with the skills in your workplace. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you. So thanks everyone for sharing your thoughts on that. That's really useful and insightful. So we're going to look at the workplace culture, which I think if organisations are going to focus on building the skills and capabilities, then it begins with the culture. It's not just about having the skills in the business, but it's about retaining them as well as being able to recruit the right skills. So before actually identifying any measures to build those skills and capabilities, there needs to be that element of strategic planning. You need to know, first of all, the current skill set in your organisation, both at individual level, departmental level, and of course more broadly at organisational level, as well as understanding the organisation's business plans, where you're aiming to go in the next 2 to 5 years, because then that helps you to determine the gaps, what you have now versus what you need for the future success of the business. So having that clear strategic plan for the company will get you from where you are now to where it needs to be in terms of the skills and capabilities. And ultimately, to do that, you need a clearly defined people learning development or people plan. Excuse me. A second component of the workplace culture is about the learning culture, and it's about how you create and foster that. So the learning culture is the environment you want to operate that encourages and supports that continuous learning. So it's supported by not just your company values or just your policies, but your workplace practices too, and all the tools that you have. So whether you have appraisals, probations, training needs analysis, so they're all workplace tools that will help foster that learning culture. And together these support a culture of growth mindset. It can help encourage knowledge sharing and encourage that eagerness within your workforce for self-development, because ultimately, you know, you want individuals to take responsibility as well for their own self-development. And overall, that will lead to staff engagement and therefore good employee retention and individual and organisational performance. And so the workplace culture must also build in excuse me, new ways of working that have come about following the pandemic and the evolution of technology. So we're hearing lots about AI in the workplace. You know, how will that touch on this learning and development and the building of skills and development? You know, technology is fast progressing, so it's important to think about new ways of working, new technologies, so you can keep on top of that. And then ultimately, as part of a workplace culture, it's about monitoring how you're doing with regards to your skills and development and the performance of your employees and therefore your business. And so having procedures in place that can enable you to monitor and review that will always make sure that you can put in place the right practices as part of learning and development. Excuse me. So this is good timing, Sue. If you can call up the poll.
Sorry, just loading that now for you. There we go. So does your organisation have any of the following? Those are all coming through now. So we had a bit of a technology sticky moment. Okay, I think we have all of those now. So I'll close that poll and share the results. So the biggest one is the performance management process to deal with poor performance and an appraisal performance, as well as job descriptions and person specifications. So yeah, it's good strategy in place. It's the training one that's the lower one, and training policies, which I guess reflects on the previous poll results as well. Okay, so I'll just hide that poll. And hopefully Victoria's back with us.
Hello, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was on mute and I've been talking. I do apologise. So yes, I'm back here. Apologies for my coughing, so you just have to bear with me, but we'll get through it. So we're going to just now think about how you can increase your workplace skills. And there's many ways in which we can think about this. And the first one really is your performance management system. So that's, you know, about having a structure in place that creates, measures, track and achieve organisational goals. So it's ensuring that everybody in the workplace is aligned in terms of priorities, progress and direction, because ultimately you need to meet those business goals and therefore improve employee performance. Having a performance management system in place, you need to have the commitment of the senior team, because it needs to be aligned to strategic priorities, the business and any other plans, your people plan, training strategy. And then managers also need to take on board, as they'll be largely responsible for implementing a performance management system and bringing about that culture of continuous learning and improvement. And so from a performance management system perspective, it needs to include methods in how you're going to improve performance. It needs to include development plans so that staff can develop their skills and capability in areas that are targeted to the business needs. And also allow for a process for how you actually address those that are underperforming, because it does happen and can happen, and it's how you can address that through your performance management system. Performance management systems can be time consuming to develop and implement, but once they're actually established, you know, they're fundamental and they can have a significant advantage. You know, so if you've got high performing individuals, they can be developed to fill key positions. Obviously that's very useful for your succession planning. All employees will have the opportunity to develop within their own roles and progress their careers. In turn, that provides motivation, job satisfaction, and ultimately aid employee retention. Talent can also be clearly identified, as well as otherwise unknown aspirations of employees. So that can then be developed if you've got that infrastructure in place. Those who are perhaps underperforming, they have the opportunity to improve prior to any formal disciplinary action being taken. And hopefully you get the improvements rather than going down any formal process where obviously penalties, warnings get issued. And then of course there's also benefits in terms of providing the tools to ensure the right people with the right skills and ability are in post. So you know, it ensures that you're able to recruit the best skills, the right talent, and hold on to the best talent as well. The second one, to just a flag, and many of you have got this as well, is the appraisal process. It's fundamental and part of any performance management system. So it helps you to set targets, provide direction for your employees to improve the performance, and just ensure they understand how they contribute to the organisation's performance and objectives. But it can also help you to motivate and retain your employees. But a really important aspect of it is that it facilitates structured discussions specific to individual performance, which then ultimately links into your department performance and the business performance. And you can then also identify future career aspirations and therefore any training needs that may come about. So we're going to we've got another 3 or 4 polls here, just quick ones. Again, just to see what everybody on the webinar is experiencing or finding when it comes to skills and capability in the workplace. So the first one in this section is all about training needs.
Okay, I think there's a nearly all in.
Thank you. Let's see. So do you carry on training needs analysis?
Yeah, so I close that one and share the results with you. So mostly no, but a few do.
A few do, yeah. I think, as we'll come on to talk about, it's actually quite pivotal, isn't it, to aligning it with the business success. I think having that awareness of what development areas are needed, not just at individual level, but departmental level or organisational level is really important. And we'll come on to that in the next section. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then the second poll, do you have an onboarding process?
This one's going to be slightly different.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll close that poll and share the results.
Ah,
so
90% do, and then 10% no. And again, we'll come on to talk about that because it's, you know, there's an element of how can you ensure, even though you recruit the right person for the job, it's about how you identify any further development that may be needed once in the first few months of employment.
And then we've got another one that's about once they're on board.
Yeah.
Do you use probation periods? It's actually, we've got more and more people asking us these days if they need to have one.
Yeah.
I think it's candidates pushing back as much as anything. So I'll close that and share the results. Go. So mainly, yeah, even more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probation periods.
Okay, and then the last one is more about line management training.
So there's that one. So do you provide line management training?
This is interesting, this one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think most of
because
there's that poll and I'll share the results. There we go.
Okay, yeah. So good to see a good proportion do both technical and soft. And I've got an illustration to sort of share later on in the slides about that piece. No, 32%. I guess that's quite high, probably higher than I thought. But there could be reasons, budgets
for that anyway. Yeah.
For that, couldn't there?
In some organisations where there's high turnover as well, and they tend to promote from within, so maybe they've learnt kind of on the job sort of more, and it's not formal. But yeah, so I'll just like that.
Oh, thank you for that. And then that's the end of the polls in this section, and we're going to move on to talking about the training needs analysis. So a high percentage of you, can't remember the number now, but said that you didn't do any form of training needs analysis. But just in considering this, it is a fundamental part of any effective performance management system, because it allows you to identify training needs, and training needs exist when there's a gap between the knowledge and skills and attributes required and those already possessed by your employees. But it doesn't just happen at individual level, it can be at departmental level or organisational level. So for example, there might be some new legislation coming into force that actually affects your entire organisation, and therefore it identifies company-wide training requirement. Or for example, one of your departments may be using artificial intelligence, do I dare say it? And so therefore that might be a departmental training need about how to effectively use AI safely and ethically in the workplace. So training needs analysis isn't just about the individual level, it's about what the organisation needs as a whole, and focused on delivering the strategic objectives. So it's about building up a training and development plan, as I said, whether that's an individual one, departmental or company-wide, and it's important to identify the key competencies and performance indicators for each role within the organisation, because then you can work out what's essential from a training requirement. And that's why job descriptions and person specifications are also key management tools, because that sets out clearly to the individual, the applicant or the employee, what the skill set is for performing that role. And that's how you can then assess that individual's performance against it when you come to do appraisals. And then reviewing against the competences will also identify those who regularly overachieve and therefore could be developed further into more senior or diverse roles if the structure allows. So there's many benefits to carrying out that training needs analysis, but ultimately it's about making sure how can the company perform and deliver on its business objectives through its people, and does it have the right skill set in place now for delivering on those, and if not, they're the gaps that ultimately need filling. And then when we think about onboarding, these are the initial few months of when you started joining with you. And I guess an employee's experience during their first, say, 6 months of being with you is going to be vital, not just for employee engagement, morale, but ultimately employee retention. If an employee or new starter doesn't feel as though they're not being effectively inducted into an organisation, or the development needs are not being met, then it can lead to frustration and just lead to them questioning whether they've taken the right role up, and that's where you start seeing people leave early on in their employment with you. And even though when you come to recruit and make a decision based on the best candidate for the job, there is still an element of needing to provide them with training and development and building on their skills, whether that's going to be your company systems, your internal processes, building their knowledge on the client or company, and company values and behaviours. So even though you've recruited the right skill set in, you still need to develop people's knowledge and understanding in when they first join. And then company inductions are also a key part of the overall onboarding process, but it's not the only tool. So typically, you might have an induction process, but the onboarding carries on way past that. And having probation periods in place is also vital for assessing a new starter's progress in their role and ultimately exploring whether there are any more training requirements. So there's no legal requirement to have a probation period. We'd definitely recommend using them just because of the massive benefits they can bring, because for example they help you to focus on integrating a new employee into the organisation, and it provides that formal period of performance review and training. So it's your opportunity to address any skill gaps early on and nip any potential issues in the bud. And then line management training. So as we've just seen on the poll from the statistics, I guess there's a different element of some of you do just the technical, some just do the soft skills. Some of you don't have any sort of formal line management training, but having an effective line manager is going to be key for any organisation from a people management perspective. You know, if we think about every organisation needs policies and procedures and effective line managers to be able to ensure that they're being applied consistently and fairly. So we have HR policies in place to help managers deal with misconduct amongst their employees, or to help them facilitate employees airing and resolving any issues in the workplace. But it takes a skilled manager to get those conversations right. And also having line managers trained can help to ensure the organisation is protected from risk of a tribunal claim. So ensuring line managers have the right skills and capabilities is vital and should be receiving that regular line management training throughout their career, not just as a one-off exercise at the outset or when they get promoted to being a manager. It's ongoing and continuous. And line managers, as I said, need more than just technical skills and capabilities for managing people. They need to have the right soft skills in being able to carry out the many employment practices. You know, if you think about interviewing people, carrying out appraisals, holding difficult conversations. And so line management training should also be about the soft skills as well. And I just put on here an illustration just to show, if you think about a manager that is dealing with a disciplinary case, then on the left-hand side, you know, if you think about the technical piece, so from a what would make a fair dismissal or not, then it's about a manager carrying out the right steps in suspending somebody. It's about a manager making sure that the investigation is thorough and has completed all the necessary steps as part of an investigation. When they come to carrying out the disciplinary hearing, they need to be following the requirements that are set out by ACAS and the Employment Rights Act for legal requirements. And then when it comes to making a decision, they need to be technically aware of what's in scope when they make a decision. So that's from a technical point of view. But then if you think on the other side, well, you need the soft skills to be able to deliver on all of those. You know, you've got to be able to effectively interview at an investigation, because if you don't effectively interview, you're not getting all the right facts drawn out as part of your investigation process. There's an element of analytical, so when you've got all of this evidence and you're weighing it up in a hearing, you've got to be able to weigh it all up and put certain weight to different pieces of evidence, and how that much value something should be taken into account. And then your verbal communication as well as written, but verbal, because how you communicate with that employee that's going through a disciplinary process. We still have duty of care to their health and well-being, but also how you deliver difficult conversations. And of course, decision making, you've got to be able to make that rational decision making that's in line with fairness and reasonableness. So that's just an example of how line management training isn't just technical, it's not just soft skills, but it's actually both. And by doing that, if you take disciplinary as an example, having effectively trained managers will lower the risk of any tribunals that you could face as a result. And then another way in which you can look at increasing your skills in the workplace even is through quiet hiring. So quiet hiring is a new term, you may have heard of it. It's used to refer to an organisation where they're trying to utilise the capabilities of the current workforce in order to acquire the new skills, therefore avoiding the need to recruit, because we all know those recruitment challenges, they're still ongoing. And so it's about looking at within to find your next candidate rather than trying to search externally. And so it is an effective way of overcoming the current challenges with the labour market and seeking out the skills and capabilities from your own organisation. So it can be more efficient to recruit, and it helps you to identify qualified candidates from a pool who already have a good understanding of your business. So an element of when they take up a role, they already know the business inside out, and so any training that comes about will be specific to the job role only rather than the business. And then, of course, it can support career aspirations and employee engagement, and therefore retaining the best talent. You know, if you've got a good structure in place where you're looking to recruit from within, you know, a lot of people will find that engaging and will suit their personal needs when it comes to career aspirations. And clearly you want to have in place a framework for how you would approach quiet hiring, because you've got to still manage it fairly, ethically and transparently, so you're fair to all employees. So if you have an appraisal process, that's a starting point, personal development plans. So you'll already have an idea as to potential talent. But other than that, you'll need to find some reasonable, fair way of identifying the talent and screening it through to be able to recruit that person. And leadership development, so that's fundamental as well to skills, building the skills and development. I guess with leadership, we can't assume that just because someone is good at the job, technically that they would make a good leader. Some people are born leaders, others need to be nurtured and developed. So having that awareness of your current workforce and their own skills is working out, you know, do you need to provide some kind of leadership development? And identifying and developing those with leadership skills potential is also critical to business success because of, you know, succession planning further down the line. And of course, leadership can happen at all levels and in different kinds of capacity. It could be somebody, a team leader leading a small team. It could be somebody leading on a project. It could be somebody seen to be leading as a subject expert. Or it could be somebody that's seen to be a leader on using a particular technology, take AI, for example. So it's thinking about your leadership development within your workplace as well, and how you can build on that. And I think the Chartered Institute of Personal Development, which is the professional body for HR management and training, they recognise that there's some general traits that leaders would have. So the first thing they talk about is general intelligence, so the ability to make sense of the complexity and difficulty of a task, an element of technical or professional knowledge and competence in their own fields. That's often the bedrock of respect for leaders. There's also an element of personality in terms of, you know, they should be able to engage with their workforce, be energetic and committed, and maintain that contact with their people. And understand their own strengths and weaknesses. It's about having the ability to inspire, which can probably be more rare than others, but it's one that certainly needs focusing and developing. And then listening, sharing and delegating skills. So these are all really important skill sets for any leader in being able to listen to its workforce, you know, being transparent, sharing the information, and actually recognizing when to let others take and delegate. And then finally, it's about the self-knowledge, so understanding their own strengths and weaknesses, which in turn will enable the leader to turn to others in the group to compensate for any deficiencies if they've got their own gaps. So, of course, leadership development, not all organisations are of the right size or structure to have some formal development programme in place, but it's about how you can anticipate for the future where people might aspire and grow to become leaders in the workplace. So we've got one poll here quickly before we move on to, I think, the next final section.
Yeah, there we go. Do you employ in your organisation? Oh, I think the gap's closing.
Okay, yeah.
It's been an interesting voting
yeah,
on that one, because it's literally swapped part the way through. It got closer and closer. Right, I think I'll close that one and share the results. Would have been quite exciting if it was an election.
Yeah, 53% yes, 47 no. And I actually think apprenticeships, that might be a good webinar to add to my schedule, because, oh, excuse me. Yeah, sorry, I thought we were going to talk about apprenticeships now. We're not, but I think that's an interesting stat. And we are going to be talking about apprenticeships shortly. So for those of you that don't, you know, it'd be interesting once you've sort of been taken through a little bit more about them, whether you might think differently about it. I think there is a perception that it's a bit of a complicated process to deal with and manage. Not straightforward, but there are massive benefits to it. So thank you, Sue. I think over to the next part of the webinar, which is all about, so another way, things to think about in terms of increasing your skills, you know, is about blended learning. So that's an approach to training and development that combines more than one way in which to develop the skills. So it has the advantage of lowering training costs. Training doesn't have to be just in a formal training room with a trainer at the front and having that delivery. Training can be through many, many different ways. Of course, there's always advantages and necessities for having that formal training, line management training, for example, health and safety training, but think more broadly when it comes to identifying training needs and what kind of methods you can use for that. So for example, blended training, we think about, you know, on the job training. So that occurs while somebody's working, so it's very much informal, learning from more experienced colleagues, or it can be more structured, such as training, attending a training course that's associated to your specific job. But generally, you see that as more the informal. You then have coaching. So people probably don't always think about that, but that is essentially a way of training. It's a similar relationship to a mentorship, but it's more focused on helping the mentee to achieve specific goals, and the coach then provides feedback and support to help the person improve their performance. And then, of course, mentorships, you know, that's a relationship between a more experienced person and a less experienced person in the organisation. And that experienced employee provides guidance and support, you know, and helping them to develop their skills and knowledge. You know, that's often good when you've got somebody perhaps taking up a new internal job role and being skilled up or new to the organisation. You have job rotations, so that's a form of training where you are assigned different roles within your organisation and you work around the organisation to experience all aspects of it. So that enables you to develop a wider range of skills for the individual and to learn about different aspects of the business. And of course, I can't forget webinars, but you have online courses and webinars. So, you know, as an example, you know, we offer our free webinars. We hope that people join those and can learn new skills and get educated relating to the subject. And so online courses and webinars that are free are very helpful to individuals because they're self-paced, flexible, and they can be fitted around busy schedules. Of course, reading, that's a great way to learn new things and stay up to date. Many books, ebooks, articles, blogs, all that can help you develop with your skills and knowledge. So if anybody, for example, on the call that has the knowledge base, we have so many articles. You know, if you're not familiar with implementing appraisal scheme, go and have a read at our appraisal scheme article, for example. Or, you know, we have lots of information as well on our website as well that's free. So there's lots of resources out there. You then also have shadowing. So that's a type of training where you follow an experienced colleague around for a period of time. And then it gives you the opportunity to see how they do their job and learn from their experience. And then finally, secondments. You know, these are all good forms of training because somebody is temporarily assigned to another area of the business and gives them the opportunity to learn, you know, and potentially there's a permanent opportunity at the end of it, but it's all good learning for the individual. And the apprenticeship, so just mentioned that a moment ago. So they are government-backed schemes, so it allows organisations to hire someone that with a new skill or upskill an existing employee to be able to grow and develop that talent. So for the individual, it enables them to earn whilst they're learning, and then for employers, it gives them the opportunity to train somebody up, learning skills in an effective way, and helps people to re-enter the workplace with a qualification. So the apprenticeship, the government supports the apprenticeships by giving businesses access to the apprenticeship levy. Large organisations with a pay bill over 3 million have to pay a set rate, I think at 0.5% of their total annual pay. And then the funds that are generated from this levy can then be accessed by all other employers to help them take on apprenticeships. So those employers who don't pay the levy, i.e. because they're not, they don't have a pay bill of over 3 million, they pay 5% towards the cost of training and assessing an apprentice. But those small businesses employing fewer than 50, then the government pay 100% of the apprenticeship training costs, and there are various limits with that. So there's a lot of financial support and opportunity out there for small businesses to tap into potential new skills and capabilities. And it's an opportunity, like I say, to mould somebody into your organisation and train them up from scratch. And you know, who knows how they go on to progress in your organisation. When it comes to apprenticeships, then they must spend at least 20% of the time on the off-the-job training. So that could be day release, block release, special training days or workshops. They have to be employed on a fixed term apprenticeship contract, so there's certain requirements that come with that. And as I said, the benefits, you know, you're moulding somebody to best work for your organisation and meet your business needs. So it's a productive and effective way for an organisation to grow talent. You can develop a motivated and skilled qualified workforce. It leads ultimately to increased employee satisfaction, reduced staff turnover, and therefore reduced recruitment costs. So there are many, many benefits to apprenticeship schemes. And so that brings us to the Q&A part of our webinar. So I know there's a lot of information that I've gone through today. Hopefully it's all helpful. And I'm sure there's much, much more we can be talking about, but I'll try to sort of pick out the best and key areas for organisations. So Sue, if we've had any questions, I'm happy to help take some, although bear with me with my voice.
No, it's okay. We haven't had any direct questions, but a lot of support for running an apprenticeships webinar. So I think we'll definitely put that on the agenda for the next quarter's plan. Yeah. There is a slide coming up shortly, which will ask you for suggestions as well. So either message us them or use that slide that's coming up in a little bit. And also had requests for copies of the slides. Yes, we'll be sending out a link to the recording, and you can download a copy of the slides after the webinar. So yeah,
brilliant.
I think that's all. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you. So let's move on. So yeah, so this brings us really to a close. Just to let you know, training courses that we always talk about on our webinars that we can offer if you need any help with supporting communication skills, leading teams, managing conflict. So you've got a mixture of both soft skills training there as well as the technical, such as your managing disciplinary grievance. And of course, we're accredited to run ILM certificates level 3 and 5. So there's lots of training courses that we can help provide and support your organisation with, as well as the technical health and safety courses. As you can see here, fire safety, food safety, mental health, that's a big issue now for organisations, and we're seeing more and more mental health first aiders get appointed in workplaces, safeguarding. So there's lots of health and safety courses as well that we offer. So when it comes to our webinars, the next one is all about how to become an age-friendly employer, and then the one in October is all about immigration developments, because we're going to be seeing some changes. So if you operate business travel in your organisation, then or even if you don't, it's good to know about the developments coming up. And so we are going to be writing the next schedule, and would like to have your feedback as to what you would like to see as a subject area. And like Sue mentioned a moment ago, we've got a poll now, and just let us know through the poll, and if you've got a specific one that's not an option in the poll, just drop us a comment in the question pane, and we'll take on board all your feedback and build that into our schedule that we're going to be writing. As I said, the options on the screen are quite broad, so if there's a specific area like apprenticeships, settlements, what have you, just drop that in into the comments. Okay, and I've got one more poll to wait a little bit longer. The final poll here, promise it is the final one. Is if you'd like any support or further information from us, we can get in touch with you, so just let us know.
Some great suggestions coming through the questions as well. That's great.
Oh, great.
Thank you. Okay, I'll close that.
Thank you.
There you go.
Lovely. And that really just brings me to say thank you everybody for joining today and listening, and thank you Sue and Rebecca for your help as well. I hope you found the webinar informative, and we hope to see you in our next one next month. So thank you everybody.
Thank you.